This is Dr. Matt Barber of Alabama Orthopedic Clinic. We are proud supporters of Ransom Reprogram, Ransom Ministries, and all of the good work that they do in our community. If you would like to learn more about us, check us out at alortho.com or barbertotaljoint.com. You can also hear more from me personally on the Ortho Real podcast. Thank you again for allowing us to be involved with Ransom Ministries and all of the great work that they do.
Do you know someone who's struggling? Someone who continues to make the wrong decisions? Could that someone be you? Have you had a problem in the past of making decisions that afterwards you were just like, why did I do that? Have you ever wanted to get help and didn't really know how? Have you ever wanted to help someone in that situation and really not understood how to do it? Did you ever ask yourself, why do I keep making these decisions? Or why do they keep making those decisions? We're going to take some time to explore and see this world through eyes we've never looked through and shoes we've never walked in. These are the sons and daughters made in His image with the potential to positively impact our community. This is raw, this is real, and this is Ransom.
With every star, we are born again. Open your heart, spend less time in your head.
This show is brought to you by Ransom Recycling, your number one choice for electronic recycling in Mobile, Alabama. Help reduce waste in our landfills by recycling all of your unwanted, unused, and non-working electronics. Ransom Recycling is a division of Ransom Ministries that is helping to put men and women back to work. Check out ransomministries.com for a complete list of acceptable items. Drop-offs and pickups can be easily scheduled through the website. Please note that we are not accepting TVs at this time. Ransom Recycling, open 8 to 3 Monday through Friday. Help our planet while helping men and women re-enter the workforce.
With every star, we are born again. Open your heart, spend less time in your head.
Hey, welcome to the Ransom Experience, where we talk to different people that have come through our program, also those that have volunteered and been partners with us throughout the years. Today, I get to talk to a really good friend of mine that we've got to know each other over the years through our camps. He's a youth pastor at Trinity United Methodist. I appreciate you joining me today, Jay, all the way from Little Rock, Arkansas.
Man, I'm glad to do it, Matt. It's good to talk to you and good to be with you, my friend.
Well, man, I've been looking forward to this, and I know we tried this earlier and we had a mess up on everything, but I think it's great that we come back, and I think maybe we'll work through some things that we maybe didn't cover in that first interview we had. So I wanted to first of all thank you for coming today and talking to me, but most of all just for your friendship and what you've meant to Ransom Ministries over the years by bringing groups here, and really that first year not knowing what in the world you were getting into. But I'll be honest, we didn't know what in the world we were getting into either, so we kind of did it together. So I really owe a lot to you guys because not everybody will take a chance on a new ministry. So I appreciate that. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out with, I just want to kind of tell me about Jay. Tell me about, kind of your upbringing, kind of where you went as a child, as a youth, and then we'll kind of move into your calling as a youth pastor and how we got into that. So I'm just going to hand it over to you, and we'll just go from there.
Sounds good, man. I was born in Minnesota to a single mom. My birth father had a family already and had kind of had an affair with my mom, and so she was a single mom. She had me and my younger sister. She's a couple years younger than I was. And so, I grew up in that very extremely poor, went through a lot of really difficult times, pretty much every kind of abuse you could imagine, truly. And I was about 5.5. She came to me one day and told me that she could not handle having me and my sister anymore, and that she needed to send one of us away. And who do I think she should send? And so I remember telling her that I'd be able to understand better than my sister Sarah would. And so and she kind of threatened it before. And so I thought maybe it was more of a threat than anything, but I said I'd go. And the next day social service came and picked me up and put me in foster homes. And I spent about a year and a half in about 4 different foster homes until my parents, who are actually related to my father is actually related to me, kind of knew of my situation and wanted to give me a break, and brought me to Texas to visit. And then lo and behold, long story short, they ended up adopting me, and they're just a great godly family. And yeah, it was just I remember even as a kid thinking family when they asked me to be a part, because I knew somebody wanted me. And that was, that kind of started my faith journey, I guess, really.
Wow. So at 5.5, you had to make a decision on you or your sister.
Yeah.
And so even back then you really had a heart for others if you think about it, because you could have been real selfish and said, you know what, send her away and I'll stay here. But, you know, I think that that's a great testament to who you are now, is that you do sacrifice yourself for other people, and through what you do now, through, you know, your kids, all those things. So you were, in foster care for about a year and a half. Is that what you said?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I went in 4 different homes. I remember 3 of them very, very well. And I remember there was a 4th, but I don't remember much about it. But it was all really honestly, it was a pretty nasty experience also, to be completely honest. I had been molested by my babysitter before I went into the foster system. And then when I went in the foster system, one of the foster parents were alcoholics and pretty much beat me every time I wet the bed, which when you go to bed worrying about wetting the bed, then there you go. It causes you to wet the bed. And so it was just a bad cycle. And then it was just not a good experience. There was just a lot of abuse that happened during that time. And like I said, of the 3 of the 4, 2 of them were pretty bad. But, and then, my parents, my adopted parents, brought me to come visit my half brother, whom I'd never met in person, and asked me if I wanted to come visit in Texas. And I remember thinking oil wells and cowboys on horses, and that would be the coolest thing ever. And so I said yes.
Yeah, for a kid your age, it's like, oh, cool, I get to be a cowboy. And
exactly. Yes.
So I think that, you know, I think about, you know, what we do through Ransom, and most of the people that come through my program here are really been through what you've been through, you know, trauma, abuse, physical abuse, adoption, broken home, all that. And so as I think about that, so it amazes me, because you could have easily been one of those guys. You could have easily been one of them that ended up in prison, could have held on to those things that had happened to you for so long, and unforgiveness and all that. So as you became like high school age and all that, how'd you deal with that? How did you deal with it?
Yeah, I would love to be able to say that I was just able to just let it all go. And when I became a Christian, everything got better and nothing ever was a problem from then on. But that was definitely not the case. I definitely held on to a lot of anger and bitterness, and the abuses that happened mentally just, you know, messed with me. But I have to say, I guess probably the biggest thing is I had a mom who wouldn't let me stay there. Mom and dad, really, but my mom was kind of my counselor throughout most of my life, still is to this day. She's probably my biggest advocate and also my biggest counselor whenever things get rough. But she just loved me, and she wouldn't let me have my temper tantrums. She wouldn't let me feel sorry for myself. She wouldn't let me wallow in my hurt. She just constantly pointed me to the Lord, and, you know, told me that life is hard, and that, you know, God is there with us, and that he won't let me down. Everybody else in this world can and probably will, including them. But the one person who will never let me down is Jesus. And that and so she just wouldn't let me stay there. So it was hard. I've gotten a lot of trouble in school, and had a few encounters with my dad and the belt and, you know, other things. But at the end of the day, their love for me, giving me a home, even in the midst of my pain and anger, I knew that they loved me. and I knew that that I wanted to show my appreciation. And so there are many times whenever I was doing wrong things that I felt bad about it to the Lord, but I was even more scared about getting caught and hurting my parents. And so I would say that God put them in my life to really just help keep me on track.
That is so awesome, because you said some things that really kind of touched. So I know we've talked before, and your mom was very straightforward, was very truthful to what she didn't beat around the bush, for what I'm trying to say. So when we go through these classes and with these guys and with these ladies, we talk a lot about truth as being sometimes the best way you can show love to somebody is not sugarcoating things. And there's a time for compassion, and I'm sure she was compassionate at times, but I'm sure there's also times where you just had to have the truth, and you didn't always like it, I'm sure.
No.
So what I saw through that, so she showed her love through truth. She was very forward. She'd have hard talks with you. How did you react to that at first?
At the end of the day, it's kind of weird, because growing up in the environment that I grew up in, you're exactly right. It's truly God that I did not end up in jail or in trouble. Most of my birth family, welfare, has been in and out of jail, couldn't keep jobs. There's lots of issues with my birth family. And so whenever I was with my mother, though, even with my mom and dad that adopted me, even early on, in the midst of I had a mouth and I had a temper, because I was just angry at the world, and I was hurt and I was mad. And my best defense was just to push everybody away, and then nobody would hurt me. And so my mom, whenever she wouldn't let me do that, and my dad, I realized, even in the midst of my anger, that they truly did love me. They were providing a place for me to stay that I didn't deserve. They were treating me as one of their own children, which they didn't know me. And so I guess I always kind of had this thing where I knew there was just something different about them. And I didn't cuss around them, and I was always careful to try to be good. Because also, I think on some level, I probably also just didn't want to do anything that was going to get me set off again, but the biggest thing is they wanted me, where many other people in my life just shoveled me off to the next family member or a friend, or just, obviously my mom giving me up. They took me exactly how I was, and they were loving me exactly the way I was. And it made me want to do better.
That's awesome. Because a lot of times truth, at first we get hurt by it, or we rebel against it, or we don't like to hear it. But then after we have time to really think through it, that's really the way they showed love to you and showed that they cared for you. And the more you saw that, the more you felt it, the more the anger got, better. Again, we still do things that we don't want to do. We still act ways we don't want to act, because we're human. But ultimately, like you said, they gave you a place to stay when you were in your worst. I mean, when you was angry and lashing out and not doing good at school or whatever, they were still there for you. Did they sugarcoat it and say, "Oh, it'll be okay," let you get away with it? No, they were hard talks. They told you the truth. And that's what I think misses a lot with the people that I serve here, is that a lot of times they haven't been talked to with truth, and I think that truth is love. And
absolutely.
So as you got into adulthood, you moved away, you went to college or whatever, went to school, and then you went to you got married, I know. Tell us a little bit about that part of your life, married life and balancing all that, and how you got, because that's kind of when your calling into youth ministry happened as well, during that first part.
Yeah, it was it's kind of funny, because I always joke around about it with the people here at churches. When they first hired me, it was back in 2000, and I was newly married, kind of pretty fresh out of Bible college. I'd actually taught school for about 5 years for the Christian school that our college had, but was fairly newly married. And Trinity came looking for me, and I told them no the first 3 times. the first time she brought home the information, and I was like, yeah, no, I'm happy where I'm at. I'm not interested, because I also knew what being a youth minister meant in my mind. It's a 24/7 job, and it's constant sacrifice of what I want for what's better for those that God puts in my life to serve. And so anyway, so I didn't really want that. And so she brought back the material, and then I was like, no. And then her friend that went to church here was trying to get me to come. She sent some more information and said, just give it to him. And I was like, yeah, that's great. No. And then the third time, the pastor at the time, this Dr. Smith, Bubba Smith, he calls me up at home and said, I heard that you might be interested in the position here at Trinity. And I was like, yeah, no, you heard wrong. And then he said, probably because he was getting badgered by the member, he just said, well, let's just go have lunch. And so I was like, okay, Lord, I can take a hint here. And so anyway, so yeah, we were pretty newly married, and I took the job here at Trinity. And like I said, that was back in 2000. And shortly thereafter, we had our first child, Rachel, who's now 19. And then, and so I served here for like 3 years, and then we had an opportunity to go down to the New Orleans area and visit her uncle. And he owned a dealership at the time, part owner of a dealership. And I remember we had the opportunity to talk with him, and he offered me a job down there. And had I known about car sales that I know now, I may have never left. But at the time, it sounded really good. And so, and I thought it was a chance to really provide for my family. We had Rachel, and my wife was pregnant with our son. And so it was a chance for us to be able to move, and me just work and her stay home with the kids. And so we moved to Louisiana, and little did we know what was coming with Tyler.
Yeah. Tyler, if who are those of you listening, is his son. And I got to meet him a few times, not like spend a lot of time, but and I'm gonna let you tell a bit about him, but I was very, I don't know. He touched me a lot every time I saw him, and every time I saw you with him and all that. So I'm gonna let you tell kind of that story, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. So basically what happened is we'd had Rachel, and at the time, I think she's like 2 or 3-ish. I think she's like right at 2 years difference. Yeah. Anyway. And so, we were pregnant with Tyler, and we were super excited, had the boy and the girl coming, and we'd gone through all the medical ultrasounds and all that. Nothing showed up ever. And then the day he was born, they said that everything was fine, went through the birth, was great. We were in the recovery. He was getting checked out by the pediatrician, and the pediatrician came in and said, I'm just not seeing what I want to see, and his head's a little bit bigger than what it should be, and I'd like to run some more tests if that's okay. And we just kind of dismissed it because we'd never had an inkling of what was going on. And so we said, sure. And so they took him back, and they'd ran some tests on him. And then she came back and said, we did an ultrasound, and he's missing parts of his brain. They're not where they're supposed to be. And it's just, we're not equipped to handle that. So we're going to send you down to Children's New Orleans immediately. And so they sent us down there, and long story short, his brain never formed properly. And so he, at birth, they said that he'd be near vegetative more than likely, that he would never learn to walk or talk, and that he was going to have constant seizures. And they just didn't know what to tell us. And needless to say, I was devastated. I was so angry at God, Matt. I mean, 12 years of ministry and working in ministry, and this was my reward. I had coached other kids. I love sports. And so I'd played sports most of my life, and I coached Little League baseball and Little League basketball and all for other people's kids. And one of the things when I found out we were having a boy, I was just so excited to get to coach my son in sports. And so not to have that, and just to know that it was going to be this hard road, and whether he's going to even live or die. They told us at the time that there wasn't one kid in the U.S. that had what Tyler had to the extent that he had it. And so there's no way of knowing what's going to happen. And so at the time I remember telling the doctor, well, I kind of took a little bit of faith in that, because then anything that he does, it's going to be God, not, them telling us what he can or can't do. But needless to say, it just really devastated me and rocked me and my ex-wife as well. And I think that that's the reason why probably the biggest reason why we divorced is because we just both kind of got mad at God and just rather than grow together and rather than come together with the Lord, we just kind of fell apart. And I remember I was just so angry and just struggling. And so it was really devastating and it was really, really hard. And then obviously the crazy part so we had to deal with that shortly thereafter while we were living in Louisiana. Hurricane Katrina hit and we had to go through all of that and the devastation of losing our job and, my job with the dealership and kind of having to fight back from that. And then it just compounded. And shortly thereafter, she came and said that she just didn't want to do it anymore. And so we divorced and she had custody of the kids for a while. And it was a really dark, hard time of my life, quite honestly. Probably the second, probably even harder than my childhood, because as a child, you don't really comprehend. And as an adult, you do,
So, I can understand totally the whole anger thing. Here's a shot in the stomach, you made it through your childhood of being sexually abused, physically abused, mentally abused, all those different things, found this great family that came and brought you into their home and became your mom and dad. And so everything's going good. You're called into youth ministry. And, then all of a sudden this happens and you're like, really, God? Wasn't it enough that I went through this at the beginning of my life? Why am I having to go through this? And I think a lot of people out there listening, myself included, sitting here thinking, man, I've been mad at God about things and don't understand why things happen and just question him. And I think it's okay to question him. But then again, once God kind of got taken out of the picture, you even said you think that's why you and your wife at the time just separated, because both of you were mad. You didn't want to really seek God, because when we're mad at someone, we don't even want to talk to them.
Yeah.
And so it drove you apart. And so people out there listening, if you're going through something like that, the worst thing you can do is separate from God. That's the worst thing you can do, because that just causes more turmoil. And you're showing that. When you go through divorce, then you're having to bounce back and forth, and you got a child who is pretty much can't do anything, and you're having to do that. Because I've seen you, when you've come for camp and you have to drop, your ex-wife comes to pick him up, and you got to get him out of the van, or you got to let her take the van, and it's just tough. And so, but I saw you handle that with such grace. And I know you say at the beginning, it was just not that. But I see how you've grown into that and how you've become. So can you tell me, how did you get to the point where you were just like, and I'm sure there's days where it's like, really, God? They still go on. You're like, when he's throwing up on you, or you're having to clean up. Yeah. You've told me all those stories, and it's like, I'm sure you're going, really? But how did you kind of reconcile with yourself that, hey, this is what's going to happen. This is where I am. I've got to really start turning to God again.
Well, I think, one of the kind of going back a little bit, I remember being in a bar in New Orleans and drinking and hanging out. And I remember thinking to myself, what am I doing here? That was really not my scene. But I was just so mad. And I literally had this conversation with God, this prayer. I had a prayer with God, a conversation with God. And I said, I love you. I knew what he had done for me in my life. And so I couldn't just ignore that. And so I was like, I know what you've done for me. I love you. That will never change. But I'm just tired of living by your rules. I'm just tired after all of this. This is my reward. I'm tired of living by your rules. I'm just going to live my life and do what I want to do and not worry about being an example for anybody and not worrying about living by the rules, quote unquote, And I had that conversation. And I truly believe, Matt, that God said, okay, because like any loving father, we're not robots. And he he said, okay. And that's when everything went to the pot really quickly. Shortly thereafter, divorce, Katrina, all that stuff. So anyway, all that to say is I went through all that mess, just angry at God. And then one day, I remember I couldn't hardly get up out of bed. I was just so depressed. I'd lost my job at the dealership. I was working construction, making $20 an hour when I could, and getting behind in I was super far in debt. Literally everything had crumbled. I didn't have my kids because she had custody of them at the time. And so it was just, I was in just such a dark place. And I remember my mom sent me this email, which I've seen before. And it was like all the characters of the Bible. And it talked about how Samson was a womanizer and Matthew being the tax collector. And it just talked about all these different things. And I remember seeing David. And I remember he, as a teenager, was this mighty man of God. And he conquered Goliath. He beat Goliath, and he became a king, and he was a great king until he saw Bathsheba. And then not only did he commit adultery, but he sent her husband to be murdered at the front lines. And so he murdered. But at the end of the day, he repented and he got it together. And he is one of only 2 people in the entire Bible that it says he died a man after God's own heart. And I remember in my darkest point there, laying in bed, not want to get out of bed because I was so depressed. I remember thinking, I didn't murder anybody and I didn't do anything crazy. So if God can forgive David and he is a man after God's own heart, maybe he'll forgive me. And I prayed a prayer right then and there. And I asked God to forgive me for being so angry. And it was just like this vision came over me, man. I don't know any way to describe it. It's just this thought came into my head of, I was in the hospital room with you and I was crying too, because that is not who I wanted Tyler to be. But this world is fallen and broken, and bad things happen to good people, even in this broken world, because it's sin. Sin is here. And so I realized that Tyler being the way he is not who God wanted it to be. And my life was not where it wanted it to be. And he was crying right there with me. And so at that point in time, I had asked for forgiveness, and I know God forgave me. And this peace went all over me, and this joy started to come back into my life. And it wasn't easy. It wasn't like all of a sudden the bills got paid and I got custody of the kids and life was grand. It was work and it was hard. And there was times where it was difficult, but I just kept on holding on to the promise and understanding that God was a faithful God, and that if he got me to this point, he'll keep me the rest of the way. And so shortly thereafter, it was just taking time. I work in construction. I've just happened to post on Facebook that I was just ready for a change. And one of my old parents up here in Little Rock saw that, and he immediately messaged me and said, hey, Trinity might be looking for a youth minister pretty soon. The youth minister here has talked about moving on. Would you be interested in coming back? And it was just kind of like, okay, Lord, if this is what you got for me, I want to get back into ministry. I want to be able to serve people. I didn't feel worthy of it because of all that I had done and the anger and all that. But I knew that God had forgiven me. And so if he would forgive me, then I would be willing to forgive myself. And if he would let me get back into ministry, then that's what I was going to do. And, long story short there is obviously they hired me back in 2009. They took me back. And shortly thereafter, we found that Tyler had good care up here, and his mom kind of through a series of events said, you go ahead and take him, which then I didn't want to separate Rachel and Tyler. So she ended up letting me take custody of both of the kids. And so for the last 12 years almost, I've been taking care of the kids and doing youth ministry, and God is good, man.
He is good. And so he brought us together. And so I look at all that you've been through and all the things, and man, what a great youth minister to have. Someone that's been where a lot of the kids you're dealing with through depression, through, adoption, through having to deal with adversity in your life. I mean, God is so cool when you look back on your life and you think all those things were horrible, and they were, and they weren't his plan. Just like you said, that wasn't what his plan was, but we live in a fallen world where that plan,
That's right.
But the Bible also says that he will take and he will turn all these bad into good. He'll take the bad
That's
into the
right.
good, but we have to allow it, and we have to get to that repentance stage. And so Ransom partnered with you. And I want to say, so that was like right after you started back there, wasn't it?
Yeah. So it was really kind of funny because the first year I came back, I think it was actually maybe the second year, I had gone on a mission trip and I'd planned it all out. And it was, I went through the United Methodist. They have like this bank of mission opportunities all over the U.S. And so I went through that, and I had done that in the past, and it worked really well. And this time it was horrible. It was like so bad. We got there and all these things were promised to us that we'd get to do. And basically I had like 30, 40 kids, and we hung out with like half a dozen kids at this gym, and we painted one lady's house, and it was just the most horrible experience. And so I was just like, I'm not doing that again. And so I was just praying about what to do. And it just hit me all of a sudden. I was like, man, I know so many youth ministers and pastors in my life over the years. Like, surely somebody knows about a good ministry we could partner up with. So I just put it on Facebook, and it just so happened that my ex-wife's cousin happened to be on y'all's board, I believe, at the time. And she was like, hey, there's these folks in Ransom, and here's what they're doing, and maybe you should give them a holler. And so there was just something, I was like, okay, I'll check it out. So I remember I called you, and you kind of explained what you're doing and what your thoughts were. And there was just, there's no other way to put it other than just the Holy Spirit was like, yep, this is good. This is going to be good. And so I remember I was super excited, and just all the things that I could hear your heart, man, even through the phone. I just knew what it was y'all were trying to do and what God had put on your heart to do, and the passion and the zeal that you had for what God was doing in your life. It was just like, it was infectious. And so I was like, I want to be a part of that. And I knew I wanted my kids to be around that too. And so, so we came down there, and that was 2010, I believe.
I think it was June of 2011. I was just trying to do some figures, because we started in October of 2010, and then the next summer we
so it would have been
started
11 then. Yep.
Because you went for 8 years, because you came 2019 was the last time you brought a group, because we couldn't come in 2020 because of all the junk going on. But I know so that was what was cool, is because you guys really, every time you came, you helped me launch things. Like, we launched a garden, built that stupid shed with 5 million screws, and I don't know how we did it, but it took a week to do it. I will never buy one of those sheds ever again. But we built that shed. Actually, it's probably not staying anymore. I don't remember. But we turned that over to someone else. You actually helped in the cafes, the original cafe. That was before when you came. That we only had one cafe at that time, and each year we kind of launched more. And so what it was kind of cool is that every summer it was different. We really weren't doing this. We're doing some of the same things, but like, we got our clean machine, that laundry and shower trailer was launched that summer. We actually just got it right before you came. Didn't even have no name or nothing on it, and we were out there doing laundry. You were the first group to ever use it. Same with our food truck. We brought the food truck in. First time we used it was when you guys were here. And that's what kind of bonded us together as a family. And you guys really helped us grow as a ministry, because we could have never done some of those. And I told the kids every time they came, you're doing things in a week that would take us months to do in the real world. And so we tried to make it good for you. You guys helped us through some things. We had some crazy summers, long summers. I remember that first summer, I slept for like 2 days after y'all left, because I'm not a youth pastor, so I'm not used to running like that. You guys run like crazy. That's what I have so much respect for you as well, because not only do you take care of a kid that can't do much for himself, and you have a daughter who's amazing and in college now, and you have all these kids that depend on you, yet you just stayed really, I know it was probably not out on the inside, you're probably running all over the place, but you just stayed calm, man, and really do a great job. I think you're a great role model for the kids out there. And I'm so glad that you were part of Ransom and what we do here. You know, I'm sitting right now in the building that y'all helped us paint when we first got it. And that's another thing. We had just got that. And now we're doing, you know, recycling. We're putting guys and women to work that are coming out of prison. And your people were never afraid to do anything that we ask them to do.
Well, you know, Matt, that's just thinking back on especially those early times, just all the years. It's like, yeah, I did. I kind of felt like we got to grow with y'all a little bit and kind of grow up with y'all a little bit and just see. But man, the number one thing, and it was so evident the moment we started working together, and it's the reason why I kept bringing a group back year after year after year. And really, after the first 2 years, then the kids would not let me bring them back. Like they desired it so much. And what I know, being a youth pastor and stepping back, is it was just straight up the Holy Spirit. It was straight up God doing what he does. And when he does work, it's always good. Yeah. It might not be easy. That's one of your sayings. Working for the Lord is rarely ever easy, but it's always fulfilling. Yeah. And that was just the truth. I got to sit back and there was little kind of bumps and things along, especially that first year. But I remember you just coming to me and being like, man, I just feel like God's telling us to go bring some water, bottled water to some of the folks on the street. And I'm like, man, if that's what God's telling you to do, I want to be a part of it. And I just saw you operating in the Spirit and just trying to honor God with y'all's ministry. And it did, and he did. And he, like, I always tell all my kids, he rarely ever, I can't think of in the Bible where he's ever really called the qualified. He just calls the willing. And so my thing is you were willing, and God used it, and it impacted my kids' lives in ways that I could spend the next 10 years giving sermons on a Sunday night to a bunch of kids, and it would never affect them the way a week serving you, the people, with God at the center. That, like, I could spend a lifetime preaching, and it would never make the impact that I did. And so I got the chance to see my kids change and get a perspective on what it is to serve those that are, you know, struggling, and to see you guys just laying your life down to love people. And it was just, God does good work when you listen.
Yeah. So, and that's what's cool, man, is that, you know, he just worked through every summer. Again, we had no idea what we were doing, but when you bring in people that are willing to just follow God, and what we did that with you guys, you're willing to, hey man, whatever God wants you to do, let's do it. Whether it be walk down into a homeless camp with water with a bunch of kids that probably most people would never have done, or they wouldn't have followed for sure, which I thought was kind of crazy of them anyway. But also going into these homeless camps and, you know, just getting to know people that are out there. And really, that's what ministry should be about. Ministry shouldn't be about, you know, how many scriptures I can memorize and how many things that can I do good, but just go out there and listen, build relationship. And that's what I saw with you and your kids. So, man, I could talk to you like forever. You know, we used to, I really didn't stay up late at night. I know you and Tara talked a lot at night, and you guys were the night people and I was the morning, but we always had long talks and we talked about really cool stuff. And I count you as a great friend. Even though we don't get to see each other as much. Normally we just see each other once a year, and we just pick off like we never even were apart. And, I look forward to you guys coming back down. Things have changed, but I know we can, hey, like you always said, just the hanging out part's the fun part, and feeding off each other. So, man, I appreciate you spending some time with me today, talking about your life, but also about, you know, what Ransom's kind of meant to you and how we've been there. And man, I can't wait till we get to see each other again. Maybe this summer we'll see. But for sure, we're going to get to see each other soon. So again, I thank you, Jay, for coming on. We'll be praying for your kids, your ministry, and your family. And God bless you, man.
Thank you. You too, Matt. Take care, brother.
All right, man. Well, thanks for joining me today with Jay. I hope you're blessed as I was. Follow us on all the places you can get the podcast. Subscribe, hit the like button, review. Review us, share it with your friends, go onto all our social media. We got Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Snapchat, all those different things. I'm not really good at those others. We're still working on the whole reel thing. But hey, join us next week as we bring you another great story from someone that's been through our program or someone that's volunteered or partners within our program. We appreciate you joining us today, and we'll see you next week.
Too many days in the darkness without a glimpse of the light. Running tired and broken and scared, but I swear I'll never give up the fight. With